This is Paul Macetta, and if you've ever wanted to learn how you can use NLP to persuade people, then sit down and stay tuned, because in this video I'm going to give you 10 NLP persuasion hacks. Hey, if you're new to the channel, consider subscribing for two reasons. Number one, we teach all things influence, persuasion, human behavior, salesmanship, psychology, but we do it differently than everyone else because we teach people street smart approaches. We teach people the stuff that works in real life situations. Second reason you want to subscribe is because we give away all kinds of free, valuable stuff, and this video is no different. If you check the link in the description below, I'm going to give you access to my book, NLP Persuasion Hacks, absolutely free for a limited time only. So go ahead and click the link in the description. Also, make sure you subscribe so that you get updated when I release more videos and give away more free stuff. So here we go. Hack number one is what I call the instant mind shift. So oftentimes we're faced with a problem of having to deal with a person whose line of thinking is stuck in one direction. So unless you know how to shift that person's mind flow into another direction, you're going to have to wait until they finish what they have to say. So sometimes it's better to interrupt and then shift the issue at hand so that you can accomplish your goal of persuading them faster. It's not that I'm encouraging you not to listen to that person. What I'm emphasizing that you have to learn how to stealthily shift the conversation to your target issue or topic so that you can lead the subject more easily to where you really want to go. You can do this by using something called the Redefine Pattern. It's a hypnotic language pattern. And when can you use the Redefine Pattern? There are a couple of different times where this would be really useful. So number one is like when you find yourself in an endless argument with someone who doesn't want to back down from a single issue, right? So it's a constant back and forth, but you know that in order to get them to say yes, you got to get them to stop disagreeing with you. Number two is when you encounter an invalid or a stalling objection. So the person's objecting to what you're asking them to do, but there's not really any concrete reason why. Number three is when the other person seems to be talking about something that's not even remotely related to the target issues. Another situation is when you want to ask someone out on a date, but the other person is talking about something else. So, as you can see from the list, the Redefine Pattern can be used in business and even in the most basic of personal interactions with other people. It can be used in everyday situations. The pattern itself is also very easy to remember. So here it is. The real issue here is not A, it's B, and because of that, and then you finish your sentence. So the A variable represents the non-target topic or issue, while the B variable is the new topic or issue that you want to open up. So all you're doing is shifting the direction of the conversation from where they are right now to somewhere else. I have another video on the Redefine Pattern. I'll post a link to it as well in case you want more in-depth training on that. Hack number two is agreement frames. So one of the biggest problems in the field of influence is that we can't influence another person if they don't want to listen to us in the first place. We can't execute any techniques, strategies, or brilliant plans if the other party is ignoring us, or worse, if they're being defensive to the point that they're no longer capable of listening to any logical argument or statement. So in these types of instances, you can use an agreement frame to ensure compliance. And I can assure you, the subject, target, customer, prospect won't even know why they're complying with you and why they've chosen to consciously listen to what you have to say. Now, as you can imagine, this particular NLP pattern will work on creative thinkers and logical thinkers alike. No matter what kind of mindset the other person has, it's gonna work. An agreement frame allows a person to agree with another person, but at the same time, they'll be able to add elements that are completely opposite to what the other person is actually saying. Now, it sounds crazy, but trust me, This is classical NLP at its best. Before I reveal the pattern to you, I have to remind you at this point in time that no pattern is going to be effective unless your vocal skills are supporting what you want to accomplish. Your voice has to be just as influential and persuasive as your words. Most influencers get too excited and rush the words as they come to mind. Don't do this anymore because it reduces the effectiveness of your message. Transform that energy and excitement into a deep and slow cadence so that the other person will easily absorb and process the information coming from you. So now that we've gotten that out of the way, here's the pattern. The pattern is just as easy as the previous NLP pattern I discussed with you. The basic formula is I agree and would like to add that. So you're agreeing with what the person is saying, and then you're adding something that might slightly disagree or counteract what they're saying. And notice that you use the word and instead of the word but, which is typically what you would use in that situation. You will be using and because it cues the other person to listen intently at what you have to say. If you use but, that's going to cue the other person to become defensive because you're about to drop something negative. Try this pattern and see how it actually encourages people to listen to views that are different from theirs. It takes a little time to get used to, I got to be honest with you, especially somebody from myself who grew up in Brooklyn. We're used to using the word but. Like, we're used to shutting people down when we disagree with them and saying things to them like, hey, I hear where you're coming from, but what you're saying makes absolutely no sense. We're used to saying things like that. It's not the most effective way to get your point across. So try to get into the habit of using the word and. The next hack is what we call yes sets. So think about this. Wouldn't it be awesome if there was a language pattern that you could use to make people say yes, even if they haven't really even thought about what they've agreed upon? Well, since you're an ethical person, which I hope you are, who probably isn't going to use this to cause harm to anyone, I'm going to share it with you right now. You may have heard of yes sets elsewhere. It's been around for decades, and it's only been revived recently when the interest of influence and persuasion has increased. A yes set is actually a line of statements that pace and lead people to say yes. Pacing and leading are basic skills of hypnotherapists and NLP trainers. You'll probably be able to pace and lead someone if basic rapport has been established, and you probably won't be able to do it if basic rapport has not been established. Now, in that case, you're going to have to go back to square one because people won't respond to a yes set if they haven't had an idea as to why they should trust you in the first place. Yes sets can be quite effective because they lead a person to believe that everything that is contained within a statement is true. So let me give you an example. As you're reading the words on this page or hearing the words in this video, taking in all the useful information, you're feeling more and more relaxed. Now, did you get the formula just by hearing or reading the sample sentence? If not, it's all right, because here's the explanation. A yes set is a statement that is usually comprised by 3 elements. 2 elements in the statement are true and can easily be verified by the senses like taste, smell, sight, touch, and hearing. So watching this video or reading it in an email or reading the statement or watching the video, right? That's easily identifiable. It's easily provable. But the third element is really up for debate. It could be either true or false. But since it's a yes set, the person is going to agree twice in a row, and they'll most likely accept the third element. This NLP pattern works well because it latches on cleanly to the cross-referencing tendency of the subconscious mind. So it's really awesome when you can utilize a person's subconscious mind to communicate with them more effectively. And this is just one of the ways that the subconscious mind works. Hack number 4 is perceptual positions. A perceptual position is simply a person's viewpoint in any given situation. There are two truths that you have to keep in mind whenever you set out to influence another person. The first truth is that the only perceptual position you have at the present time is your own. We don't carry around the full perceptual positions of other people because we only live our lives and not anybody else's. The second truth is that in the game of influence and persuasion, the only perceptual position that truly counts is the other person's perceptual position. So now this might sound a little dramatic or excessive, but when you want to influence another person, you're going to lose that battle for influence if you don't know what the other person might be thinking. Of course, you may never actually know the exact thoughts, but you can approximate them. So here's my advice to you before even attempting to use any influence technique. Take a page from NLP and try to determine the perceptual position of the person first. So put yourself in their shoes throughout a dialogue, and I can assure you that it's going to have an immense impact on the way that you'll be formulating patterns and tactical statements throughout the interaction. I said this in an earlier video. I am extremely vigilant about what I'm going to say to somebody, especially if it's in a tough situation where I got to have like a tough talk with somebody. I'm extremely vigilant about what I'm going to say, and sometimes I will run a statement, a sentence, a phrase, a point that I want to make to somebody. I'll run that through my mind 10 different times and change it, because each time I run it through my head, I'll ask myself, if I'm putting myself in this other person's shoes, is there anything in this sentence that I'm saying that they could misconstrue in any way? And sometimes there is. Sometimes it takes me 10 times to get that right. And again, it might sound excessive, but this is what really persuasive people do. This is what master communicators do. Versus poor communicators that not only do not ever think about this stuff, they have no filter, right? Have you ever met somebody that just says things without ever thinking about what's coming out of their mouth? You know, these people, very few of them have friends. They don't have good jobs. They don't know how to get along with people. I mean, unless they're just inherited a position of power somewhere, or they have extreme authority, like, Gordon Ramsay, he could talk however he wants to people because, they're paying him big money and he's helping people out, or they're being a contestant on his show. But most people just cannot get away with talking to people like that. So you got to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. So when you put yourself in the other person's perceptual position, you're going to be able to test your statements for effectiveness. So for example, if you're aware that the other person has a creative bent, or they're more of a right brain type of person, statistics aren't going to matter to that type of a person, because you may be coming from a logical point of view where statistics matter, but somebody like that may respond better to a story about something. So if you were trying to prove a point to somebody and you started taking out and firing off statistics to that person, and that person's not really a data-driven person or a left brain type of thinker, then you would be way better off using a metaphor, a story, or even an analogy. Hack number 5 is strategic uses for but and for those two words. These two words are probably the most overused terms in the English language, right next to I. But it doesn't matter. We're going to talk about these two terms and how to use them strategically. So in NLP, it's all about results. That's all that matters. Language patterns should more or less produce the intended results. Otherwise, some language elements may have been misappropriated during the interaction. Now, you might be wondering, what's so special about the words but and I? But and I are very familiar connecting words, and since they're very common, people rarely pay attention to their use and placement. But little do people know that these connecting words can have a profound impact on the way that they process facts when a master influencer uses them and connects them strategically. So, how can you use these words strategically? Here's how it works. Number 1, Use and when connecting two elements in a statement if you want the other person to remember and accept both elements. That's why we use and in agreement frames, because we want the subject, the target, the person, the prospect to note that you have agreed with them and you have provided additional input after you've expressed your agreement with them. You use but when connecting two elements in a statement if you want the subject, prospect, customer to completely discard the first element in a statement. People usually make the grave mistake of putting a positive element at the beginning of a statement and then adding the negative element towards the end. This is one of the main reasons why people become defensive when they hear the word but. It doesn't have to be that way. To avoid resistance, simply reverse the order of the elements. Here's an example. I think you're in good health, but you really need to see a therapist to help alleviate those joint pains. Versus, you need to see a therapist to help alleviate those joint pains, but the good news is that apart from that, you have almost perfect health. Two very different things. Hack number 6, levying criticism without damaging your ability to persuade. So sometimes we set out to influence others through criticism. By nature, people dislike criticism because it puts them in the wrong. It shines that spotlight on them that says, hey, you screwed up. But then again, there are times where you have to criticize people. So what do? Neuro-linguistic programming has several language patterns that can be used to avoid the common problems associated with criticism. The first pattern that you can use is the delete pattern. That can be accomplished with a simple but. As I've already discussed, but can be used to disconnect two elements found in the same statement. The but immediately negates the first element of a statement. Here's an example. The project that you've just finished needs some tweaks, but overall, it's an excellent example of how a star programmer can work with the highest level of pressure. I don't want you to hang out with your friends until 2 a.m., but if your friends can wait for you until Saturday night, that's a completely different thing. You can also combine and because strategically to give both praise and constructive criticism. Here's how that would work. The work that you did was exquisitely done because you spent a lot of time working on it. And how great would it feel if you went ahead and reviewed parts 1 and 2 just to make sure there are no errors that have to be corrected. Here's another combination that uses the word yet to set a long statement into motion without interrupting the flow of ideas. I almost agree that you shouldn't be working overtime, yet because it's your first week on the job and you could just work on the stuff you have to finish now so you can leave for home sooner. Hack number 7, how to heighten the other person's awareness instantly. Practitioners of persuasion and influence know how hard it is to get another person's attention, and it's even harder to encourage someone to focus on specific parts of a presentation. So if you thought you had to repeat yourself over and over again until the other person finally pays attention, think again, you don't have to do that anymore. All you have to do is use an awareness pattern. An awareness pattern uses words like aware, realize, and see. This particular pattern can really create a huge impact on any audience because words like aware can instantly change the subject's perception of what's coming after the trigger word. If all goes well, the subject will believe that everything you will be stating after the trigger word is undoubtedly true. I know this is pure gold to a master communicator because nothing could be more powerful than a simple language pattern that could evoke this effect on somebody else. And the best thing about this pattern is that you could modify the pattern to create an even more powerful effect. The basic formula of the awareness pattern is notice that as you hear these words, the power of NLP is increasing tenfold. That's just the basic pattern. You can modify it and give it a little boost. Did you notice that as you hear these words, the power of NLP increased tenfold? It takes practice for statements like this to come out naturally, but here's what I could tell you. Over time, it'll begin to feel more natural. And the language patterns will slowly become a part of your regular day-to-day language. That's why I recommend that you practice different language patterns a few minutes every day. 10 minutes or even just 5 minutes every day is better than practicing for 80 minutes on a Saturday morning. It doesn't work that way. The brain needs time to get used to something new. Frequency wins over volume when it comes to this stuff. Hack number 8, a hassle-free approach to establishing rapport. Rapport is important because it allows you to feel at ease with the other party. Rapport also builds confidence and trust. Without confidence and trust, no one is going to hand over resources to you. Without these two important elements, people will also find it easier to object to anything you have to say. Classic NLP recommends matching and mirroring to establish rapport. When we say match, you're simply going to act parallel to the other person. Breathing rate, rate of speech, and posture are 3 of the most common elements that are mirrored during the rapport building stage. For a lot of people, this classic approach is difficult to use because it involves a lot of what I call mechanical copying. And it can be quite a challenge to hold an engaging conversation if you become preoccupied with mirroring the person's breathing pattern. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't do this, but what I think you could do is, and what I'm going to share with you is a better technique. Think of the other person as a close friend that you're dying to have a conversation with. That's it. With this simple shift in the way that you view the other person, you'll be able to establish rapport more easily. Why is that? It's because when we're talking to familiar people, rapport comes naturally, sometimes instantly, because we're at ease. When the subject sees that you are relaxed and at ease, they will begin mirroring you. And over time, this mirroring will eventually transform to rapport. Try this technique with a friend. I'll give you a little tip or a little secret. When I first started creating training programs or even doing YouTube videos, one thing that I understand that's important is that you have to be able to speak in a way that your audience can resonate with. Okay, that's very important. However, if in the process of trying to sound good to your audience, you start coming across as unauthentic or not yourself, well then that's just a recipe for disaster. It's better to be yourself and be natural and at ease than to try to be someone that you're not. So one of the things that I used to do was I would just hang a picture of my best friend on the camera or on the computer screen, and I would constantly look at that person and think about how I would be communicating if I was talking to that person. If you go back and watch some of my first YouTube videos from like 6-7 years ago, they are horrific. I mean, usually anybody that starts, when they start something in the beginning, they suck at it. And I certainly did. But as I started becoming more comfortable with what I was teaching people, and as I used that little trick of putting my friend's picture up there, I got to a point where I became a lot more relaxed when communicating my messages. Hack number 9 is pacing. Verbal pacing is a necessary component of influence because it reduces the possibility of objections. When you verbally pace someone, you give statements that you know they'll agree with so that eventually you'll be able to gain compliance when you're ready to make your offer. So technically, pacing is really like a form of subject conditioning. You will condition the subject to trust what you know so that they will agree to everything that you say. Asking a series of common sense questions is the easiest way to get somebody to say yes to you. So let's say you're trying to sell an air conditioner to someone who lives in a humid part of the country. The following questions might be able to condition the person to eventually buy the air conditioner from you. Do you like feeling cool and comfortable? Would you invest in something that would make the whole family extremely happy? Will you invest in relaxation at home so you'll be more energized for work the next day? See, unless the person hates air conditioners or loves humidity, it's probable that you're going to get 3 yeses immediately after you use those statements. You can then add the most important element in this set of questions. Will you let me install the air conditioning unit in your house today? The 4th statement is the leading statement because it presents a completely different proposition. This is the subtle turn in the process of persuasion. If the subject has been saying yes to most of your statements, adding the shifting statement would probably give you instant compliance because there would be no real reason for the other person to say no. And hack number 10 is future pacing. Outcome-based thinking is one of the hallmarks of influence and persuasion. It's a hallmark method because it can work in almost any situation. Unless you're trying to influence a Martian, outcome-based thinking will most likely give you the results that you want. And it's fortunate that you can encourage a subject to think in such a manner through future pacing. Future pacing allows an influencer or a persuader to quickly build anticipation in another person. Anticipation is important, especially if you've been relating to the subject all the benefits of your offer that you could possibly think of. Future pacing is used primarily to quickly change a person's behavior because they'll be anticipating a positive future event. Anticipation can easily double personal desire, which is the reason why this technique works so well in business settings. And the basic formula for future pacing is an agreement frame plus a regular pacing / yes set plus future pacing. This pattern is a little bit more complicated than the previous patterns that we discussed because it makes use of 3 other distinct patterns. The first part of the pattern is put in place to gain the trust of the individual. The second part of the pattern is used to condition the subject with the rest of the statement. And then finally, the third part of the pattern adds the element of anticipation. The final element in the formula is actually the last step before the call to action. So here's an example. I agree that you should have been the one who's been given the higher paying role in the company. And I would like to add that our focus now should be how we can help you attain your personal career goals. At the present time, I fully understand that you feel down because you want to be valued as a true asset to this company. Why don't we talk on Friday about how we can help you achieve your other career goals? So, as I said, what you got there are 10 NLP hacks to influence and persuade people faster and easier. If you want to just get them all in the PDF form, just go ahead and click the link in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, leave me a comment, give me a share, and make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel and hit that notification button so that you get notifications when I release more videos and give away more free stuff.